Hello everyone, I'm in the studio today and I thought I would make a video to explain the difference between color mastering and transparent mastering. So the goal of this video is just to give you a little bit more information about what mastering engineers do, but most importantly what I do and how I see things. Hello everyone. Mastering has two sides. There's the colorful and there's also the transparent one. The classic way of doing mastering is to have a transparent vision of the song. So most engineers, what they will do is they will level out the loudness and then they will make corrections so that the song, once it's louder, will not harm the ears, and also they will correct problems with phasing and balancing as well. And these points sometimes can drastically change a song. And so many mastering engineers, they often ask people to review their mixes because they prefer that the client is aware of what they're about to do. I have a different perspective. I think that a master should sound right. It should sound according to a reference, and it should sound also close to what other tracks of the same genre sounds like on the market. And there's many people on this side of things that are very careful about how they approach the mastering, and they will do, for instance, boosts or cuts that are no bigger than 2 dB of adjustment. In my case, I usually try to respect that, but sometimes it's necessary that you do adjustments that are a little bit further than that. But I'm always really careful not to change completely the phase or the way the song was made in the first place. And this brings me to the point where colorful mastering, if you're interested in that service, what it really means is sometimes you want to sound like this artist or that song particularly, but you feel like your mix is far away from that. So colorful mastering is a way of saying you will hear the mastering. It will be really obvious that there's a huge difference between what you gave me and the end point. It can be a shock for certain people, so that's why I give revisions on what I do, and people can contact me and say, can you fix this, or can you lower that? And in most cases, sometimes I can, but sometimes it's better to do it in the mix. So I will be asking people to do sometimes corrections and the leveling of certain sounds in the mix. Maybe the synth or the kick is too low or too high, and then doing that in the mastering, that won't work well. It's sometimes doable by EQing, but usually it's never as good as if you fix it in the mix in the first place. So colorful mastering, what also means is that we can add some clipping, by clipping I mean mastering clipping, not like clipping that is hurtful for the ears and will use a lot of distortion. Very mastering grade clipping will always have this kind of sheerness, and will also bring the saturation of the song to a point where it'll feel a bit louder, more defined, thicker, sometimes kind of fuzzy as well. So there's also saturation that can be done. In analog equipment that I have saturations option, and what they do is they bring a certain thickness, and also I find that saturation is a way of putting a part of the song in bold. So it could be like, let's say the mids are saturated a tiny bit. It just brings them up without boosting a multi-band compression or an EQ. And it's like a different way of gaining amplitude in that section. It can really help also bring a certain cohesion between all the different sounds that come together, because sometimes when you do analog summing, when you do your bounce from your DAW, I'm not an expert at explaining how summing works, but it seems like a DAW sometimes have limitation on what it can really do. And in my experience, the saturation can really help kind of smudging sounds together, which is really pleasing for the ear. That's for coloring. And sometimes people they just want to hear what I will do with their song. They don't really have a goal or a target song that they want to sound like, but they kind of want to see if I can bring an enhancement to it. Maybe the highs can be shinier and maybe more defined, or maybe I can control the roundness of the low end, which is something I would not do in a transparent mastering. But with a colorful approach, I can definitely define the way that the kick and the bass snap together. And that sometimes in mastering can do some really nice results. So I can do that. The only thing that I don't do in mastering is what we call writing. Writing is the equivalent, I would say, of automations. Some mastering engineer, what they do is they will play with the gain, or they play with the compression or an EQ during the mastering section, which can amplify the effect of transitions, for instance, or control the dynamic range. So for instance, a good example of writing is a video that I've seen of the mastering of Pharrell Williams' Happy. Apparently in the chorus, they were shifting some effect just to create more drama and impact in that section. Although this song doesn't have like a lot of impact, but they really kind of brought that all together. Transparent mastering is for people that are really satisfied of how their song sounds, and they just want to make sure that there's no conflicts. By conflicts, what I mean by that is phasing issues, sounds being too snappy or hurtful for the ears. Sometimes it can also be conflicts between certain sounds that, because of the mid side, it can be a little bit too much on the side, so we can control that. And the goal of the transparent mastering is usually to level the song so that it will work on the market, but also based on what is the distribution method. So for instance, vinyl has certain prerequisites, and as you know, streaming services also have certain way of approaching it. I usually find that if you correct certain things properly, it will work pretty much everywhere. So when I do transparent mastering, it's really to make sure that the song is bulletproof everywhere. Sometimes, of course, there's like little adjustments of the loudness to be done. I find that transparent mastering is really efficient on, for instance, an album where all the songs are mixed a bit differently and the cohesion between each song is maybe not so efficient. So in that sense, I'm going to be working at making sure that the listener that will listen to all the tracks one by one will have the same kind of experience and won't be needing to lower down the volume or gaining up. It will just be in harmony. That would be the best way to describe it. And when I do color mastering, it's pretty much the same thing as transparent. I also cover all these things. When it comes to mixing, I would say that sometimes people ask me, what's the difference between a transparent mix and a colorful mix? But it's exactly the same thing as mastering. So for mixing, sometimes we really need to put a lot of effects and compression and EQing to get that song to a point where it feels like a one big beefy song. And you don't always get that. Sometimes like the sources that the client gave me are harsh or low volume or lacking density or lacking details or too much details, and I have to correct all these things. So if people want me to do a mixing and they aren't sure about what they provided me, they should always select the colorful mixing, because in that way it gives me more room to just adjust to get the best result possible. And of course, the transparent mixing, sometimes it's just focusing on the summing and making sure that there's no conflicts and room for all the sounds to be heard properly. It's very subtle, but usually my approach is to have something where all the sounds can live in harmony, if I can say it properly. And like mixing is probably the most difficult service to do for an engineer in my case, because it's very arbitrary, and sometimes certain sounds I feel like they should be more in the back, and some other sounds should be more in the front. And I have to take critical decisions. And if I take one decision to put a certain sound in a position, everything will be dependent of that. So sometimes people say, oh, can you just lower this, or can you turn that up? And what they don't realize is that this simple action will create imbalance between everything, and everything is kind of interlinked. So if I move that, I need to just adjust everything that is related to that sound, and sometimes destroys a mix. And it's funny how 2 dB can really create like a difference. So I hope that was helpful, and maybe you get inspired to also review how you prepare your mixes and mastering. And I find like my role as an engineer, as your partner, if you work with me, is to make sure that you can control the part where you're having the most fun. And I find that artists should really get the best of the production side. That's where they should be the star. They should be feeling inspired, like they should feel like confident that no matter what they will do, they will be in the end backed by me. That will make sure that they sound right. So if you can produce and make music that you love doing and that you feel inspired while you do it, just be assured that I'm there to be your guardian and the person that will make sure that everything works in the end. So go back to whatever you were doing, and hopefully you get a dose of inspiration from this.